Are you looking to buy a home in the Myrtle Beach and surrounding areas? You need to reach out to Wave Beach Realty today. Wave Beach Realty has been around since 2013 and is a local family-owned company. We specialize in investment properties, single-family homes, multifamily, and condotels. Call Wave Beach Realty today at 843-957-3872. That's 843-957-3872.
Okay, welcome back. Well, this segment, we want to talk about faith. At my age and my background, I have noticed that faith has become kind of a topic that maybe people don't talk about anymore.
Right.
So I don't know where you stand. I don't know what your faith is or if, what questions you have, but I do have a background in ministry, so I've been in the Christian scripture a lot. So
Okay.
I'm just curious, this whole generation gap here. You're my son's age. I know where my son stands. How does your generation feel about faith?
So I think a lot of people local to this area, like the South, obviously you got the Southern Baptists here, so I think religion is pretty big in the South still. I don't know the generation across the country. I would say it's probably faith is kind of a lot of it's going out the window. A lot of the people I know that are from this area and that are here, even in my generation, are still fairly religious and mostly Christian. But I would say in general, as a whole, if you just took South Carolina and the people that I know locally out of it, I would say as a whole, I would be willing to argue that upwards of 50 to 60% of people in my generation probably have either no faith or very little, or don't even discuss it, or don't discuss it enough to even know what their beliefs are. And I do agree that it's probably the discussions about it are probably so minimal now that I couldn't even tell you how often it's even happening, because I don't think it's
What
widely
do you think the lack of knowledge of faith? What do you think contributes to that?
I think that we've replaced faith with other things. I think, again, I know we talk about social media a lot, but I think we're so like connected to our phones and social media and getting likes and what people think of us, that I think like vanity and some of these other things have actually replaced faith. Used to, you didn't have all these things, and I don't know. I just feel like people are so busy now that a lot of people they don't take the time to think about it, or it's just they don't care about it as much, or maybe their families weren't very religious growing up, and so they just don't really get into it.
Does your generation go to any churches, do you think? Do they spend much time in a corporate setting with faith?
People that I know my age, I would say probably I would, if I had to estimate, I'd say in just my age of friends that I have and people I know, I would argue that only maybe 30% of them probably go to church regularly, if at all. Yeah, so it's definitely gone down. I mean, I come from a family that my grandparents are fairly religious. My aunt and uncle are very religious. My mom's fairly religious. She goes to a church in Loris. She works. Sometimes she has to work Sundays, but she does go to church a lot of Sundays. I was raised around church. I wouldn't call. I am a Christian. But I would be lying if I said I'm extremely religious, because I don't go to church a lot. I was for a little while. I was dating a girl and we were going to church every Sunday, if not every other Sunday, and I did enjoy it. And the preacher that was there was actually really good, and I actually enjoyed a lot of the messages, and I was able to relate it to life, and I actually got some like therapeutic and tools out of it. I think when it comes to me though, I'm not good at listening to other people tell me how a certain way to live and how they interpret something, when I might read the Bible and interpret something that they're trying to say to me completely different.
Right.
This guy that I was listening to when I was last going to church, though, was pretty good at like correlating it in a way that actually made a lot of logical sense, because somebody like me, the way my brain works, I'm very analytical, I'm very factual and matter of fact. So I feel like a lot of the stuff in the Bible, there's like a lot of I feel like a lot of it might be like some of it's hyperbole, or the way it's described, it's like to teach you but I don't know how to describe it. Like some of it, there's reason it's there. There's an explanation, something that's trying to teach you in it, and I'm good at grasping that myself. But then when somebody's trying to relay it to me, like how they interpret it, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. So I think that was my like kind of my little battle with going to church and having people tell me.
What do you think is an important component of faith that we need in our life? In other words, do you think the lack of faith now has led to some of the issues that we have?
I think society's much better when they have more faith, or they have, I think even let's say even if the things that you have faith in, like as a Christian, even if even if everything that's being taught wasn't true, like even if it wasn't, I think having that faith is better than not having it regardless. I think that whether it's what you believe in, or I think it gives you a good set of morals and values, and because I think there's a lot of good teachings there. So the lack of having faith in general, I think, is very degrading for society, regardless of what your beliefs are.
Do you think this is the how do I put this? Do you think where we're at now is our final kind of existence, or do you think there's something afterward?
So I look at it from a practical standpoint, whereas like I think about like how we're here and how we just breathe oxygen and how the Earth's here and how everything just kind of matches up perfectly, and it's almost too perfect if you really think about it for there not to be something else out there. And that fact that it just like all of a sudden was here one day and like just magically happened from some explosion or the Big Bang, it's harder for me to believe that. I think it's harder to not believe in anything than to believe in something.
I would agree with that.
So I do think there's something afterwards. It's hard for me sometimes to grasp that out of all the religions there are, a lot of them have a lot of similarities from what I've looked at. It makes me wonder, it's like, all right, is Christianity the right one? Is Hinduism the right? Like, you're going to tell me these people are wrong and they're not going to make it somewhere, but these people are. Now, and I'm not referring to like Scientology. Those people are psychopaths. Cults are different. But organized religions, I think in general, they all can be good unless you radicalize on certain things. But I believe that there's something afterwards.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people might believe that there's something afterwards just because it's human nature to not want to think that once you die, it just goes to black like before you were born and that was it.
Yeah.
But I think there's something afterward. I would say that I am a Christian, and the concept of God makes a lot of sense to me, and I do believe in Him. I don't know that I've ever had like some like crazy like awakening or something like a lot of people talk about that they've had, that like where they like knew for sure He was there. But I'm always skeptical. It's just how my brain operates. Faith is something I've always struggled with.
So what's your questions about faith? I've kind of grilled you now. You can grill me a little if you want to.
So put me on the spot here with the questions of faith. Honestly, if I had prep time, I probably would have come up with 100 questions.
We can definitely.
So there's like, it's just like, okay, so like for example, like you hear about like when like miracles happening, Jesus performing all these miracles and all this stuff He did. It's like, but you don't really see stuff like that. Like all the stuff that you see during biblical times, you don't really see any of that happening directly. Maybe you do. You have to just look at it a different way. And then
I can tell you, after spending so much time in faith, I have seen miracles.
Okay.
I have seen things happen that cannot be explained by science.
Okay.
Now, will they be explained in the future? That's possible. But I definitely have seen miracles. But there are 2 times in the Bible when we saw an extreme amount of miracles, even unusual for the time, and that was Jesus, obviously, during His time on earth. Obviously, to me, He's God. God indwelled a human body. And so lots of miracles then, but also during Moses' time. Moses was a forerunner of Christ. He's called the deliverer, which Jesus ended up being too for the Christian faith. And so those 2 times, particularly in the Bible, we see a lot more miracles than you see other times in the Bible. And I think the same thing today, and I think a lack of faith today has led to a loss of some of the power that comes from knowing God.
Okay. All right, so 2 questions I thought of, and you can answer them. I'm just going to tell you the 2 questions. You can answer them whatever order you want. One question, I feel like I see like all the bad things that happen in the world, I feel like they always happen to good people. Like you have like kids that are 5 years old and they develop like a brain cancer, and it's like if we're living in a world where like there's a God that controls all this, like why would He allow things to happen like that? And it seems like it's always like good people, like people that are like total scumbags seem to live longer and they get away with all this stuff, and maybe there's a reason for that too. Maybe I'll answer my own question. That's one question, like why does He allow all these bad things to happen? And then secondly, my other question would be, again, when it comes to all these other religions, there's similar stories that come down from these other religions where you can relate them to other stories in the Bible.
Right.
Are these stories like all things that happened and then people threw all these religions together and it got mixed up over time and we're missing some of the pieces, or they just kind of got spread out? That's my first 2 questions.
Well, the first one, that's a hard one. That's been plaguing people forever. And I'll give you my personal opinions, and I'm sure there's people listening who probably won't agree with me either. But yes, I do believe God has the power to control everything. but I also think he chooses not to because he's given us this thing called free will. I've always believed that God made humans so they would choose to love him, whereas angels were made to worship him. And even then, when he made angels to worship him, the Bible says a third of them revolted and left heaven with Satan himself. But I believe he chose man and woman so they would then have to choose to follow him or not. We see this in the Garden of Eden when they pretty much, and we really don't know how long they stayed there, but they stayed there for a while obeying him, and then obviously ate the apple. And well, it wasn't apple, but the fruit of knowledge, which which to me is a whole nother story. We could spend a whole podcast just on that. But so he gave us this free choice, and at what point would he step in and take that free choice away? So therefore, if we have free choice, then people are going to make the choices they want to make, whether it be selfishness or for him or whatever, and so it leads to bad things. So which ones does he stop and which one he doesn't? I believe he allows it all to happen because this is the process that's going through for his plan. I believe that there's a ultimate plan in the universe that God is allowing to play out, and he does interact in it, and he does answer prayer. I believe he answers prayers, but he's only going to answer prayers if it matches what he's trying to accomplish. I've had people die in my life that I don't understand why God let die. They were such great people.
Yeah.
But if you believe there's something afterwards, I also know that they're in a better place.
Got it.
I believe they are actually in his presence now. So the people dying young, some people believe that he took them out because they were so good, took them on to heaven to enjoy them. Which there's a lot of things I've heard over the years that I just that make me think that we need to dig deeper.
Yeah.
But as far as the bad stuff happening, it's just that's just the life. That's what he set in motion. So it's got to happen.
And so since he's omniscient, he can control everything. Why couldn't he just kill the devil today and be and over with, and everybody just live happy?
I think that time's coming.
Yeah.
But again, he set something in motion to let it happen, to allow people to come to know him. To me, the greatest joy is knowing him.
Okay.
Above everything.
Okay.
Now, I've gone through a lot of things in my life, and I've gone through a lot of organized religion. I've been on the other side and seen the underbelly of the church. And you have to come back to, when you talk about churches, the churches are people. And God does come in, and he does. I believe through Christ we're saved, and we're being made into a new creation, but we're still people.
Right.
And so things actually still have to be refined. Paul says in the Bible to work out your salvation. So to me, it's a process that happens over a lifetime that you've got to continue to learn. There's always something new to learn. And as for your second question, we'll probably have to continue that on the podcast because we're almost out of time with this segment.
Yeah.
But I believe there's a lot of false religions out there, and they are similar because we've had scripture for a long time. In fact, there's one Far East religion that actually talks about a virgin birth. And a lot of similarities before Christ was born. But if you understand that all that stuff is in the Old Testament, if you know how to interpret it, then Satan himself could read that and also implant that somewhere else in the world. So I think they're all out there. You have to come down to the point, to me, it's kind of a process. First, you got to decide, is there one God or many gods? Because a lot of these religions, there's multi-gods. I mean, I'm not an expert on Buddhism, but there's more than one Buddha. You had original Buddha, but you have more.
Yeah.
And so Hindu, I believe, worships different types. So you have to decide how many of these gods are there. If you come down, there's only one God that leads three religions: Muslim, Jewish, and Christianity. And which one is the right one? And I will say, from a study of all of them, Christianity to me is the only one that I look at and say, well, the person who started it is still alive, because I believe Christ rose from the dead. He was crucified and he resurrected on Easter, and he is alive. I worship a living God. The other religions, they don't have that. Muhammad, who was a prophet, is dead. Obviously, they're worshiping Allah, but Allah didn't start it. Muhammad did. Jewish are looking to God, but I think reading the Old Testament, I haven't read all their Old Testament. It's a little bit different than it's their Bible. But the parts that I've read in our Old Testament, it's pretty clear to me that Jesus Christ was the fulfillment of their Messiah. Now, I know if anybody's Jewish is listening to us, I know you disagree with me, and I understand that. You can send me an email. But that's what I believe. And So that leaves Christianity as the top one.
Okay.
And that's about it for this segment. We'll continue this on the podcast.
Yeah. Let's keep this rolling.
Okay. So let's take a break here and we'll be back. Are you ready to get your financial picture in focus? Then give me a call at Clark's Financial Coaching at 803-736-3877. That's 803-736-3877. Or reach out to me by email at coachwesc@gmail.com. coachwesc@gmail.com.